Because I'm surely going to
Oh, yeah.
touch my nose, touch my eyes, touch something.
No, I was talking with somebody whose spouse is a teacher, like young kids and all the stuff they bring back.
Oh, yeah.
My son is dating a physician who deals with elderly people. So kind of the same thing they're doing with sickness, but yeah. Good luck to him.
As a medical doctor, you tend to get when you it's the children's hospitals where you get sick. But not so much the seniors. You bring disease to them. Hello. You sit there, Bob.
You had to wait. You had to wait for the signal there, and then the signal comes and you move here.
That's right. It's the little hidden signal. Get over there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special finance meeting of October 24th, 2024. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, including our near neighbors, Shannon First Nation and South First Nation. We chose it as a place we live, work, and play. Welcome to the meeting for this afternoon. Please be sure to have your cell phones turned off during the meeting. And this meeting will be recorded. We have people live streaming in today as well, so that's good. Committee, we have an agenda before you. Are there any additions to the agenda? We have 2 kinks of correspondence, so we'll put that in correspondence. Anything else?
Move adoption.
Moved by Councillor Strickland, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. It's time for public participation. If you would like to speak, please step up to the mic. Any of the residents in the gallery this afternoon, state your name and the street in which you live. You have 4 minutes to speak, and there is a timer for you to watch the countdown.
Gary Lamb, Hackmore Drive, Hackmore Drive. I'm just a few questions reading the material. When you look at the material, the budgets, and I guess I'm looking at, first one is the building department. The revenue increases per year. What are those as a result of? The minimal? So did we just apply some percentage to the, so there's just...
Yep.
Yeah, it was just inflation.
Inflation?
Yeah.
Just through the chair.
Well, what-
Is that a 2% increase per year then?
Yeah.
On the revenues?
Yeah, it's kind of rounded off to 1,000.
Right, thank you.
Well, when you look at the numbers between 24 and 25, 111 versus 112, that's 10% would be 11, so 1% would be 1, so it's not even 1% increase.
I think based on, well, I'll address it when I get up there.
Yeah,
Give you a
okay,
break.
I just
No.
point
Sorry, yeah.
out, when I look at some of the numbers, you know, and I initially thought it was inflation, but when you look at the numbers, it raises some question. And then the other one is the planning environmental services. In 2024, we had a planning one-time expense of $197,000. That's gone away. We're not going to incur anything like that going forward again. So just raises the question, why 2024, nothing for the next 5 years?
So with your questions, Mr. Lamb, if you have several, you're hoping to cover off those during the meeting?
Well, the meeting or now,
Yeah, well, so public participation is generally not a back and forth. You have 4 minutes to bring your
well, that's my
forward.
question then.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And Mr. Creek, you'll be able to address those? Thank you.
And then the final one is the tax revenue. Is the tax revenue basically how that is derived with the increases? And I suspect you'll probably go through that in a little more detail. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the gallery this afternoon that'd like to speak?
Just a question, do you let us speak after each section?
Yes, so it's in the agenda where we have an opportunity for the public to have some input after we've deliberated.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
this is the model that we started earlier this year, the last budget meetings. And we decided that was something that the public wanted, and we put it in place. We've decided to continue with it because there's some value to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. And I'd like to ask our Chief Financial Officer to come to the mic and explain the next draft budget report, please.
Thank you, Council, Mayor. I guess for clearing questions about the budget from last meeting, I'll go over some of the ones that were sent in by email. There was additional ones in the pinks. Didn't have time to get into those guys.
You can lift the whole podium, Jeff, just under
Okay.
it. I think it's just to make it easier for people online to hear.
Hold on to it. Anything can happen.
Good.
This is the first thing.
Was good, right? Good.
No, that's not
That's better?
Go that bit.
All right.
Okay,
So-
next.
The budget questions from last meeting.
Okay.
Number one, so they were wondering why there were discrepancies between expenses charged between councillors. Wasn't really in the budget per se. It was more of the SOFI from 2023. And so that was because different councillors choose to go to different conferences.
Yep.
If they did go, then they got larger expenses. If they didn't go, they don't have any. Example, a couple of them went to UBCM or AVIC this year, like the union. I think most of you went to UBCM this year, or like half of you.
3 days.
So that explains that. Another question about councillors that are on other boards, who pays for their expenses. The district does not. That's all covered by the board that they're on. We don't absorb any external costs related to those. They were wondering if cost overruns are questioned in each department. And so since I got here throughout the year and during this budget preparation, I've gone and questioned all the department managers and heads, like the Chief Administrative Officer, Chief Stephanie, and Public Works Chris, and to find out what resulted in the overage, finding out if it's just a one-time expense or if there's something that's going to be ongoing. If it's going to be ongoing, bring that to council's attention for the budget deliberation this year, see if we want to actually account for that going forward or if we need to put a stop to it. If expenses are higher than budgeted, would we need to cut back on other services? In that regard, the budget is a really good benchmark to have, but it's certainly not something that we're going to stick exactly to. Like we got a budget of $1,000. Once we're at $1,000, we're done. Especially doesn't apply for public works in the regard of storm coverage or hazardous trees and snow cleaning. So ideally, we'll be over in some areas and under in others, but those overages end up canceling each other out. The financial plan that's approved by council every year, there's 7 lines for all the expenses that we incur, but in our accounting software we have 750. So we spread it over a lot, but our concern is those 7 lines. As long as we're under budget on that, we don't have to come back for a financial plan amendment, and everything's generally okay. Been doing a good job of having surpluses in the year. We can put those into reserves or have it for extra projects that happen each year. And then they did mention the total increase on those first 4 departments that were mentioned in the first budget. Total comes to $243,000, which would translate to a 6.5% tax increase. Based on 1% equals roughly $37,000. Unfortunately, it is a sizable increase for 4, but that was covering policing and the new Ecom 911. And so those 2 changes alone come up to $176,000, or 72% of the 243. And unfortunately, we have very little say in that regard. Council's done a great job kind of pushing back on the Ecom 911, along with everybody else on the South Island. So there's a chance that we'll be able to remove that coming forward, but we have to probably wait for the new year to get a final say on that one. And then another 15% of that increase is going to be related to wage increases because of the new collective agreement for staff, and then making corrections for the payroll expense that was under budgeted based on CPP and EI. So that covers off those questions. The questions from Gary here. So yeah, the building department revenue, we put it in at $1,000 a year, not quite the inflation of 2% a year. So I misspoke on saying yes, it's going to be inflation. We're coming up with new building department fees and charges that will bump it up a little bit, but generally we don't go back every single year to readjust those. So we're hoping we'll be able to pull that in. This year was a down year. I hear that's same thing across all municipalities. Building wasn't happening, interest rates are too high. Hopefully that gets corrected here in the near future, and then people will put on their secondary dwellings and build new homes on empty land that they've purchased, which will hopefully bump us back up. But the 111, 112, pretty on average with where it's going to be over the last 5 years. Like some years we only had 80, other years there was 120. So fall somewhere in the 111. Under the planning and environment, so there's the $197,000 for the one-time expenses. Where did that come from? So we received a grant of $172,000 related to the housing initiatives plan. So we've taken it all in this year. They're working on it. There probably will be something next year, but since we've already received the grant, I'm not really counting for those expenses. In addition, because that was a one-time expense, we're going to be doing all the budgeting for special projects and one-time expenses in December. So I just wanted to remove those, get it stuck to just the operating expenses that we're going to focus on right now. And then Recs and Culture, the tax revenue. So what is the deal with that? Those all around, that is coming from the West Shore Parks and Rec Society, along with the Greater Victoria Public Library System. And so that's all based on their requisition, that tax revenue of $960,000. And that lines up with that expense halfway down the page saying total West Shore Library, $960,299. Those two offset. So we get requisition by both of those entities. We collect it, and then we just cut them a check in August. Here's your money based on their requisition. So it's not anything we get to keep, but not anything we get to play with. It's just in and out. So that's how it shows up on our financial statements there. Moving on with the presentation for today. So we're looking at our building inspection, planning, and recreation budgets for the year. For 2024, there were a few overages for building and our office supplies. So we purchased 20 permit books, cost $636. We had a total budget of $600 for the entire year. Now, thankfully, those 20 books are going to last us a number of years, so we're not going to be seeing that expense next year or 2026, probably not, maybe 2027. But, so we're only going to do an inflationary increase of 2% in that regard. Question?
Councillor Shukin, yes.
Through you,
Yes.
what is a permit book?
It's a little book about this big. Chris, building inspector, address, what he ends up seeing on it, says, okay, they want to build an addition for the basement or like a garage or something like that. Here's the fees, here's the charges,
Okay,
you're allowed to now go do that work
okay,
based on that.
thank you. Thank you.
And then next up was the payroll expense. This is the same thing that I talked about last week as well. It's just the payroll deductions for CPP and EI under budgeted. We've corrected going forward. I'm still waiting on the numbers for CPP for 2025. They've given us EI, but not CPP, so hopefully before the end of the year, we can get more accurate detail for you. Planning, the only one. Payroll expense, same as above. Recreation. So for this year, we had some salaries that weren't budgeted for that were related to memorial bench installation. When I was talking to Chris in Public Works, sounds like this was the first year that they had done that. So unfortunately, we didn't budget for it, but we do end up billing for that to collect from the person who wanted the bench to be installed in the first place. So
Mr. Creek, is that the cement pad that we're talking about?
yeah, the cement pad, getting the plaque, getting the bench, setting that all up and putting it in.
Okay, because I know that for a number of years, PTAS Trails Coordinator actually put out the cement pad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm aware. Not
Okay, so-
this year, yeah.
Okay, not this year. Okay,
Yeah.
that's my question for clarity. Councillor Gray.
Bill, I don't know if this is the correct time, but we looked at the bench memorial policy the other day, and it'll come to council. Is it meant to be cost neutral? Are people meant to be paying enough to pay for both the public works and the PTAS work, or maybe Councillor
Yeah,
Shannon?
Councillor Shannon, please.
Yeah, it is
Not
meant to,
complaining, just curious. Yeah.
it is meant to be cost neutral, covering the expenses. Now, with the pouring of the concrete pad, I'm not entirely sure where that fits in. That may be a conversation we need to have, just how that is billed and covered. Yeah, but it's definitely meant to be cost neutral. So.
Okay, thank you.
So next up was our repairs and maintenance for community buildings. There was a lot of asbestos inspections that happened this year. And then we installed a new electric door at the community house, and along with an exterior light clock. So that just really drove it up. The door alone was $4,700. That just pushed us over budget for that regard. I'm not banking on us installing a new one next year, so again, just regular inflationary increase on that account. Grounds maintenance, that was over because of the work on Moral Lee's Meadow out there. Now, we are going to receive a grant from BC Hydro that will recoup all those costs. So when I subtract all that, we're actually under budget. Everything's fine on that one. But if you look at it right now, why did we go over budget? That's the reason. Nice and easy. And then park bench expense. So the cost of those new memorial benches over budget. We had budgeted $25. They came in about $2,800. So not excessively over budget, but something to look forward, and we'll talk about that later, I guess. So, in regards to everything we're going to talk about here today, so the big ones, again, collective agreement for staff, that's going to impact our wages for everybody. The other taxing authority requisition increases, and then we applied 2% inflation for office supplies and memberships and land title fees, etc. So for the building and planning department, their biggest one, new collective agreement and the payroll expense correction. So those come up to $7,140, currently estimated for the budget, out of the $7,801 increase. And the remainder is just going to be those memberships, the training, contracted services, nothing too big overall. For the planning department, their total increase is going to estimated to be $3,484. $1,564 comes from the wages and payroll expense correction, and then next is the contracted services that we have with our new planner that comes in. That's going to be $1,443. The rest of it, office supplies, advertising, land titles, pretty small overall. Recreation. So because of the Memorial Bench costs, West Shore requisition increase, and the Greater Victoria Public Library requisition increase. So the West Shore is increasing the requisition by 5.4%, which is $23,528. And then the Greater Victoria Public Library is, I estimated to be 5.5%. They haven't sent in anything, so I based it off their last 5-year budget projection. And that would cost us $16,964. I'll update that when we do get the final number, hopefully a little bit less. But both of those items, separate line on the tax notice, so it won't be lumped into our general municipal rate. And I guess for the recreation department itself, so I budgeted in $3,500 for wages to cover memorial events installation and maintenance, if that's going to keep going forward. I'm proposing to reduce the trail maintenance to the 5-year average of $3,000. Right now we've budgeted $5,000. Something to maybe see if we want to change in the future. Nothing set in stone here. And then the final thing would be there's currently a $5,000 grant given to the community hall. That'll be up to council to say if you want to increase that or keep it the same going forward. My discussions earlier with Shelley sounded like we'll keep it at $5,000, but certainly open to suggestions. And so with all those things said, the total increase for an average residential home for those 4 things is going to end up being $21.82 per year, or $1.82 per month. Now the non-discretionary parts, the West Shore Parks and the library, that comes to 78%, which is $17.04 per year. So like administration and our internal wages, that kind of thing, it's only 22% of that total increase. Overall, fairly small. And then on the last page of the report, we've got I put in the total running for tax increases for the year based on our last report and this one. For non-discretionary, we are sitting at $112.31 per year on the average home, which is about $9.36 per month, which, oddly enough, comes to 78% of the total tax increase for the year so far. Ideally, econ doesn't happen. We can drop that number significantly, but no control over that one. When we go down to our internal costs, we're at a total of $31.17, or $2.60 per month, which roughly would equal to be about a 2% increase in property taxes for the average residential home. And I believe that is it. Do we have any questions right now?
Any questions, committee, for Mr. Creek? Mayor Little?
Yeah, thank you for your report. It would be nice if the Econ 911 wasn't going to be, we don't know yet, so I think it's wise, as you suggested, to keep it in the budget. The mayors and the CAOs are pushing back on this quite significantly. We've got a meeting coming up next week regarding specifically about this, so we are pushing back, but I think it's good to keep it in the budget for now.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just really quickly, you mentioned the trails maintenance budget. We have not had a chance at PTAS to talk about where we think things will be in 2025, so good to keep it where it is right now, but we, and I do note that I think it's December 5th, we're going to be talking about special projects and one-time costs as well. I did just want to flag that Parks and Trails is looking at the Parks and Trails master plan, and of course, depending on where the whole election and government goes, one of the big things that we'll have before us is the housing needs assessment that we must complete by this year, and then looking at how that's all going to unfold in terms of OCP and land use bylaws and all that. Again, a requirement from government as it now stands, so just, yeah, like that. But, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Creek? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Creek, for your presentation. And I'm going to open the mic up to the community to have some input on what we've discussed and the presentation. Is there anybody in the gallery who'd like to speak? Yes, please.
Arroyo Windfall Road.
Bring
Oh,
it
yes. How's that?
That's great.
Two things. Where was the asbestos? And is it all gone?
Staff, anybody wants to answer it? Can we share some mics?
It doesn't totally reach.
It's not a lot.
Okay, so it was just checks for asbestos. It wasn't actually like, hey, we found asbestos, we need to remove it now. But it was they checked the community house over here,
Oh,
the municipal hall, and I'm blanking on the third one, but I can get back to you on that.
okay, thank you.
But yeah, as far as I know, nothing was found, so we don't have to book a big repair in.
Thank you. And I might not quite have it right in my memory, but am I correct in thinking at one time some communities have pulled out of the CRD arts contribution? That plays in my memory.
Okay. Randall, do you know? I know there was a query about that last year from some citizens to do so.
And
we chose
that's
not to.
always something that the community or the council could do if it was warranted, I suppose. In particular, what are you getting at?
In particular.
In particular, what are you getting at?
Oh,
You would like to
and
see
the
us-
fact that we do have our own art studio here, which I don't believe is specific to Machosen people. It is for region. So why would we be duplicating? Because that's what, 25,000 a year.
So this came up last year, and there was a suggestion that we actually pull out of the CRD arts. There were quite a few residents that counted that because there's benefit to it. One of the big benefits, as we heard Monday night, was I think it was Councillor Epp in her report had told us that, or informed us that MAPA had received $10,000 grant, and that comes by way of the CRD arts. And yes, and Willinghead, yes, their stage crew had that as well. So there's lots of benefits to be a part of arts. And so when we discussed this last year, it was, do we want to duplicate them, which I don't believe we are. Our artists here, our MAPA does receive grants from the CRD Arts. If we choose not to be a member of that, we have no access to those opportunities. And there's several different types of grants. Plus, there are a lot of residents who partake in either activities with the CRD Arts, which is throughout the whole region, or they participate, whether it be in the symphony or various different concerts and art shows, performances. We have a lot of talented people that belong
And
to
so,
this.
are you saying then as a resident of Machosen, a Machosen resident wouldn't be allowed to take part in CRD arts?
No, we do. We do now.
But if
That's where MAPA
Machosen itself pulled out, could a Machosen resident then not take part in the CRD art function?
Not
Am
sure.
I-
What I do know is we wouldn't be eligible for any of the grants,
As a council, okay.
no, as a district.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Gray? Yeah.
Well, and through the chair, Avril, I don't know if you recall, but looking at the numbers this year, grants received were 26,750, something like that, and we paid in 25,000. So in fact, we're receiving a little bit more back
Okay.
than what we put in.
Thank you.
Mr. Mann, so
Just a question for the CFO. The 143 per year projected tax increase, is that at this point subject to fine tuning and anything else that may come up? Is that what it's projected to be on the average residential home assessed value?
Correct. Like this is really preliminary numbers, so
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for that CPP thing, and then a number of other projects that are gonna happen. So waiting on council approval for the operating budget itself. So
Right,
this is,
the soft number,
yeah, it's like this could easily change going up or down.
yeah. And I understand, I appreciate that. The second question is, what is the average assessed value of residential properties in Machosen?
Right now, for 2024, it was 1.3 million. Like, give or take 10, 20,000 bucks, but
Yeah,
right around
Okay,
there.
good, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to have some comments or input? You're welcome to speak at the mic at this time. Before we move on to the agenda. Okay, seeing none. Move on. So I'd like to address some of the points. Thank you, Mr. Creek, for addressing the previous one. There was mention of the value of having volunteer appreciation, and we budgeted for 2 of those concerts this year. We only have 1. There's great value in that. It applies to everyone who lives in Machosen. A lot of the volunteers that are volunteering in Machosen are not all on advisory committees or citizen-appointed committees as such. There are a lot of other people that live here, so it is for them. It is also for our community to come together. It's an outstanding gathering situation where we can all come together in the summer to have some music, chatter. A lot of people do bring picnics. We've only had 2 of them. The first year there was an incredible amount of people. This year a little bit less. Weather was a little bit different. We will continue doing that, and it is only in July that we have done it thus far. So that's what that's for, and for all ages. It's not just for appointed people that we have done in the past, and those events in the past were catered. $700 nowadays wouldn't cover too much more than maybe cake and tea, with maybe a few extra things. So we are going to continue with that because there is interest in the community to do that. And you do not have to be a volunteer. We've had lots of people come and just set up their blanket or their chairs and bring friends. We do also have people that live outside of our community that volunteer here, whether it's at the Old Barn Books or the garage sale. Lots of different situations. So that is what that is for, and this is something this council was enlightened to do based on the initiation of our mayor. So we will continue with that. Looking at the paints for today, we have one from Mrs. Sawatsky. And I thank you for the time that you've taken to write in about this. Some of this was discussed Monday night in regards to Healthy Communities managing the school site. The CAO did clarify that it wouldn't be on management. We're still exploring the operation of how the school will play out, what our plan is, what the finances are. Who is involved, whether it's a stakeholder group or an advisory group. At the end of the day, the management is still with the staff because this is an asset that involves revenue and booking and insurances and those various things. So this is still a new topic that we need to discuss further, I believe. Is that correct, CEO? Yes, thank you. Okay. And to Mr. Brown's submission. Some of this has already been covered off from CFO Creek regarding costs. The people that do the final approval of this, other than council and the management of it, are our CAO and CFO. This is our most senior staff that is responsible for the complexity of our budget. We do hear a lot from our public as far as what our services are, whether they want snow plowing or they don't want snow plowing. In some cases, I've heard from residents that there's too much of some of these services and maybe not enough of others. When we hear loud and clear is when the actions of snow start to fall, or as one example, there's lots of things. But we can cut costs. We have a pretty good service team, I think, from all of our staff when it comes to emergency or roads, dry or not, trees falling, that sort of thing. So lots of communication from residents, and we are listening. And as Mr. Creek said, sometimes when we are over budget, we can make adjustments. I do not believe that we're frivolous with our taxpayer dollars. We're very conscious of how we're spending taxpayers and investing taxpayers' dollars. Where there are surpluses, if they aren't going into revenue, we are putting back into the community in different situations where everybody can benefit. I think I covered most of that. I do want to ask Councillor Shukin to speak to the second part of Mr. Brown's letter, and some of this you did cover Monday night. If you'd like to repeat that now, it'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Just in regards to the Duke Road East roadside trail, when I came to this committee last year, the request was for $20,000 to do both the survey, and if there was room left over, and if we decided to proceed with the trail, the additional amount to do that work. So $20,000 survey and the work. The claim that we're over budget because it's $11,000 instead of the anticipated 10, on that basis is actually incorrect. We are working with the pot of $20,000. The other thing, my understanding is that we all agreed at that time that this money, funds for this project would come out of the federal gas tax. And I was left with the understanding that that would be the case. Now, of course, this is money that comes to us from the federal government with charge from the gas pumps. So it is actually not on Machosen's books in terms of tax dollars. And I should note that active transportation projects are basically at the top of the list in terms of what the funds can be used for. It's now called the Canada Community Building Fund. And so long and short of it is we're well within our budget, and look forward to seeing the project continue. So.
Okay, thank you. There was a survey also taken from the consultant that we have for active transportation, and so in reference to a survey for Duke Road West, I'm not sure if we will do that in the future or not, but right now a lot of it is just information gathering, as is the surveys, correct?
Correct.
Just gathering information, no action yet.
And in connecting with Mr. Payette, the survey is going to be used both for an assessment of the potential of the trail and also traffic safety measures, which could include narrowing lanes, speed bumps, signage, etc. And again, it is in response to the public feedback that we heard on July 31st. So, and ideally, will fit in very nicely with the active transportation process.
Right, and I know myself, I filled out that survey. It was a two-part survey. One was multiple choice, and the other one was sort of little pins on a map where you could actually make a comment. And there was a lot of very interesting comments. So I'm looking forward to the outcome of those surveys as well for information gathering for next steps. Councillor Gray.
Just a comment, I don't think the survey will determine narrowing the lines. We've already decided that at council. That the road lines are going to get moved in the next time we paint the road, I think was the decision we made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just a point of order, we haven't actually had a committee discussion yet on the budget materials, so if we come back to that, that would be helpful. And about the correspondence, I guess I'm not totally clear. It's nice to respond the way you have, and thank you, the Chair. But I think there's some issues raised here that do want some discussion at some point.
Okay, so now's the time, seeing how we're on that part of the agenda. So what sorts of comments would you like to talk about there?
Well, I wonder if we want to go back to the budget itself.
Well, let's do that. But did you want to address something here in particular?
Well, sure. There's a first a letter from Barb Sawatsky that's asking us about the role of the Healthy Committees Advisory Select Group. And I think we haven't really discussed that, except we got a report the other night
Yes.
with some ideas. And so that discussion is still before us, I think. It was for ourselves the first time we'd seen that as well. And so we provided some commentary, and I guess we will come back to that discussion. It's not been decided what we're going to do. And so I found the letter quite helpful to think about what are our priorities and what should we do, and is it a staff work or not. And this is reflecting some of that discussion. So when we come back to it, we can look at that letter again and see if it provides any helpful advice to us. On the letter from Darren Brown, or sorry, maybe there's more about this, so lots of others would like to comment.
Yeah,
Councillor Shelby,
that's super,
yes.
yeah. I think just in terms of the first paragraph of Ms. Sawatsky's letter, I think Mr. Pyatt made it really clear last time that the volunteer group was not managing the school. And I misspoke at that point. I thank Mr. Pyatt for making that really clear. So,
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah, we talked previously about the advisory committees and the idea of because of the circumstances requiring so many meetings of so many different committees, we were going to reduce the number of committees possibly, and that would be a public discussion, and we haven't had that discussion yet. And then the idea of changing the terms of reference was an additional idea, which I think has come from the CO, which is reasonable to discuss, but is an item on itself that we still need to talk about. I did receive a call from somebody sitting on the committee who was quite concerned that we hadn't approved it, and I said we hadn't even discussed it yet. So I'm looking forward to that. On the other piece of correspondence, what I read here is simply the question of how are we managing things and how are we choosing what to work on. And I think I heard the other night from the CEO that it's kind of difficult. We don't have that much in the way of staff. And this letter to me sort of reflects the same position, which is we should be careful how many projects we take on because we don't have the ability to actually do it all. And so that's what I took as sort of let's pay attention in as regards to the budget. And we'll be further along here. I think we need to identify our priorities and just drop stuff that aren't priorities. And so I sort of take that point there. And then how are we actually managing the budgets? And when we talk about, when we turn and have our council discussion, I have a question about that here that I think reflects the issues raised here.
Yeah, so as we've experienced so far, and my understanding from staff is that we have not done those projects for a variety of different reasons, and I think that we're in good hands with the staff we have helping us to reprioritize and navigate when we do have the ability to do these things. I don't think we're taking on more. We're just trying to flush out the what's important and what isn't, and moving those on into the future.
Well, I think it would be probably difficult to point out in our strategic plan where an additional door into the school fit. So there's things like that that take staff time, energy, money, all kinds of things,
Yeah.
and we kind of veer away from what our plans are. Not complaining, I'm just saying that's the idea, is get some rigor here about our processes, so we don't just go to new projects in a flash,
Right.
but check about what the resources are that are required, and the budget process will help us do that, I think. Yeah. You raised the question of the carrying on with the volunteer summer thing, and I appreciate your words about that, but we haven't actually talked about whether it'll carry on or not. That's, in the budget.
And in reference to that, the question that came up in that letter was that there were two, and why were we spending $1,700? I can't explain the $1,700 line item, but I do know that there was only one concert, and that we had approved $1,400 for two. So clearly there's some funds coming from a different place on that, and the person that would have the answer to that would be our CFO, Mr. Creed. So I was only addressing to the fact that the comments were about that it wasn't valuable and where, in fact, we found that a lot of people do find it valuable. So we are trying to meet the needs of people in the community. A $700 concert in the park isn't extravagant. Certainly we can cut away all those sorts of things and not fund all the services that people have asked, but we're trying to find a balance to meet the needs and desires and services for our community, within our community. Okay, so going back to your comment regarding the opportunity or the committee discussion, we had Mr. Creek gave us an opportunity to have his input on it. Did you have more input that you wanted to have on his presentation?
Yes, I was wondering, on the first page, there's reference to revenue, loss of revenue of 20%. We just didn't get the money in, I guess, for building department. And this is referring to our current year. And I'm wondering, will the revenue we're getting from the fire hall cover that off?
Sorry.
Yeah, so the drop in revenue for the building department is pretty significant. So when I was looking at it, we were at 35,000 out of 110. And talking with Chris, he says that we should be getting another, 15, 20 more. Things are kind of picking up here at the end of the year, thankfully. So we'll maybe, fingers crossed, get 50%. But the extra revenue from the fire department, not really enough to make up for that kind of a gap.
No.
Unfortunately, you could fill in, rough estimate, 20,000 of it, maybe 30 if we really stretched it, but certainly not the whole thing.
Yeah, so through the chair, what you're saying is that there's been less building, less people taking out permits for building.
Correct.
That's not really anything we can control, but that's just the reality of this year.
Yeah,
Less building.
yeah, it's like if people want to come out and add a new addition or build a bigger garage, that's nothing that you can really tell them to go do. So it's like we're stuck to the whims of the residents and what they want to do with their property. If they don't do anything, then we're not going to collect anything at all. But we could, I guess one way to drum it up, you could reduce the fees and see if that changes anybody's mind. But then we also lower our overall revenue, so that's spot. We're already lower than most people for their building fees anyway right now, so not the best way to look at it.
So these are projected estimates based on historical data that we've had.
Yeah. You amazingly, like, you have had years in the high 100, mid 100,000s. So I was impressed with that when I took a look back at it based on kind of what I've heard about development here. So you do get a lot of revenue from it. It's just one bad year, doesn't help the average, but certainly things aren't meant to happen every single year. Like, solid $111,000 for a decade. So
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I mean, other people may have questions to add about the report. I was wondering about the electric door that we put on the community house, which sounds like a good idea. But the theme kind of runs through here for me, which is, I mentioned it the other night about the school in Maca. They spend money on certain things over there that are needed, and we spend some money on things over there that are needed. Likewise, the community house, I'm not sure who's making the decisions about those things, and which ones are the district's responsibility and which ones are the, in this case, the community association's responsibility. And I'm not arguing that the community association should pay for the electric door, but I would like us to get clear, if we're going to be budgeting, what is the arrangement in terms of ongoing costs and improvements. So not a criticism, but a question about how do we decide that? Because I don't think it's written down clearly in any of our license of occupations. So when I see a new cost of $4,700, which is not a lot of money, but $4,700, it's sort of a surprise. Oh, we didn't see that, or I don't remember that. So maybe so that's the comment, and maybe the question through the chair would be, Jeff, if you could give us a hand with that, that would be wonderful. Just to look at those as we move through this year's budget, maybe we could look at those leases and see, well, is there a line? And I think it would help the organizations that have a license of occupation as well to sort of understand clearly where we're at, if that would be agreeable to the chair.
Thank you, that is a good question. It became not clear to me, but I was informed last year that there was an agreement, and so Ted, if you could help me with this, in regards to the community house when they requested some accessibility parking, and that we should pay that. The message I got from MCA was we should pay that because it's something to do with some arrangement we had or bylaws, because we own the building and we had been asked for funds for the air conditioning and that. So I don't know the arrangements that we have with the different organizations or the buildings. I do know about the grounds groups and those are lease agreements, but I know MACA has a much more extensive lease agreement, and I'm not sure what the current language in there is, and if it is actually covering it off, because we have been paying for furnaces and doors, but then MACA themselves will pay for some stuff. So if that's something that staff can answer, that would help us as well in translating that in the budget as well for our residents to understand too, please. Thank you.
So if I could say ditto the issue of PTASC, and what do they take on versus what do we take on? So this is a little bit different than a community organization. But going through the notes from the other night, we saw that there were money questions coming out of PTASC. For example, the Hillman Trail, not that it's their responsibility, by the way, they have a very small budget. I'm more just wanting us to get clarity so we know where we're going. The Hillman Trail was one of them. And I think the question is it a PTASC, but does PTASC own the budget, or is it actually a trail budget that council looks at and it guides PTASC as it spends its money? And who's managing the budgets? Who manages the PTASC budget, for example? And do they do that with you, Jeff, through the chair, Mr. Creek? So just so we know that, and again, not complaining, but just I think it'd be really helpful for the group to know whether or not they're likely to spend their monies, or if they know it beforehand, so they can get together and they know it's their money and know what to do. Because when I see the questions, I think, let's get clarity, and that'll just help everybody get their jobs done. And I see the plea for that in the minutes, and maybe the discussions have already happened, and that'd be great, but it'd be good for council to know too.
So Councillor Shukin will be able to answer that, and as I recall, PTAS creates a budget, and they're allotted a certain amount historically in our budgets, what that is, but they actually have to present what they're going to maybe spend that money on or not. Some years they do, some years they don't, and that has to go through staff. They just don't willy-nilly do it. And then when they do it, all of those bills or receipts, whatever, are to the staff, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, correct. Typically, PTASC has $10,000 of minor, what's it called here, minor trails development budget. We made some efforts to dedicate that money. For example, there's a situation with the bench on Hillman Trail, which I can get into at the next meeting. So, and yeah, we are very diligent in terms of connecting with CAO and CAO to the CFO, making sure,
That was my understanding from years ago as well. So it's always.
And maybe we can deal with that in the terms of reference of the committees when we look at those, because that's a good spot to lay out who's doing what and help everybody know. So it won't be, because I see them as questions that the committee is asking us. And so
so it's my understanding as well that our staff, specifically the deputy corporate officer, is working on harmonizing those terms of references of all the advisory committees, and each one has its own description as well, but the basic TOR will be more harmonized and with a layout of probably a paragraph to say what the purpose is of the advisory committee. So I think we'll probably be seeing that coming forward at some point too. Mayor, will you have a comment?
Yeah, in saying that, recognizing that Parks and Trails Committee is a very different committee than the other committees. It's not just advisory. They do boots, they are boots on the ground.
Yes.
So they have historically 10,000 in minor and 10,000 in major, that they are allotted every year. Very rarely do they spend that all, and it's not rolled over. They've asked for increases, but have never been granted those increases. And so if we were to set up a Parks and Trails department here with 3 full-time staff, for instance, to look after our parks and trails, that would be an enormous budget, because with staff, that would be, over 200,000 probably. So we're very lucky to have the Parks and Trails Committee stewarding the management of our trails and our parks. So I think we're getting a pretty good deal for $20,000 a year.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, and so what I'm speaking to is not so much replacing the committee, but rather giving them the tools and the clarity so they know what they're doing and they're happy with the money we're giving them. And we see right here on page 3, the question that comes up is the issue of the park benches being over budget, for example. So it's just that is raised here for me to make sure that they're happy and things are getting done in a way that satisfies them and satisfies us.
Right, and I believe the overage is probably the increase from the manufacturer of those benches. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Usually that's what it is, because there's no cost, no labor cost to PTAS, although our staff is doing the cement footing for it. Yeah, so those, it's almost a cost neutral. Yes. Mayor Gould? No. Councillor Shukin.
So another issue, I'm curious to know, and maybe it's a question for Mr. Payette as well.
Okay.
So an item like invasive species control, now we have allocated, as I understand it, 20,000 in the current year's budget. I don't think we've only spent half.
Mm-hmm.
But is the plan with this current budget, is it to add, say, 2% inflation and maintain that amount? Typically, is that where, or do we want to?
This is the rabbit budget?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Can you hear me? So it's kind of based on the contract with the service provider. And so if he indicates to me there's going to be a cost increase, and I put that in the budget.
Gotcha.
But that's sort of a fixed amount, so I wouldn't say it's based on economic increase of any kind, just based on whatever his price will be next year.
Okay.
If we agree to do it again. It's up to council
Yeah.
to spend that money on. It's not just rabbits, there's the public works have a little cost for some invasive material as well. So there's a little bit in there for public works as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask when we'll discuss that budget item?
During the capital review. It's capital and projects.
Okay. Okay.
It's part of our operating budget?
It's part of that whole discussion about, I recall it as being part of the discussion with various projects we're doing and how much we're gonna put towards, the guy who does the rabbit. That's how I remember it. If it's in operating, we can talk about it during our operations, but I believe it was part and parcel with the projects that we were doing for the year.
I think that you're correct there, CEO Pet. The operational part of it would be whatever's in the public works that they're dealing with. Is that correct, CFO Creek? For this other invasive species?
Yeah, the invasive, like noxious weeds kind of thing.
Right.
So public works staff actually took some training on it this year for handling the chemicals and that kind of thing for getting rid of it. So we're increasing the budget a bit for that next year.
Okay.
But the rabbit part, that was a big jump for 2024's budget of going from like 10 to 20, something like that. So that'll be up to if you want to keep it up, then we'll stick with it, and depending on what the guy wants to charge, that'll.
Right. Yes,
And I-
Councillor Schuster.
Yeah, I see Mr. Pyatt's point. It did seem to be, there's a project nature to it because and I think there's like an outlook that council has to give to this. I mean, I'm feeling like I'm seeing more and more rabbits on the grounds, and of course that there's a spillover to the broader community as well. So how we tackle that probably is worthy of a further discussion.
Right, so we started this program last year and didn't quite make a dent, even though we had a pretty good effort. This year, there was a significant drop. And stay tuned, because I did put an article into the news about this. There's a serious concern of the overlay going into our agricultural community especially. And residents who have had rabbit situations. I had one in my part of Metchosin, not my neighborhood, but only across the way, and they actually came to us here at council very upset because they had a lot of rabbits and it was a tripping hazard, etc. And somebody on live stream had contacted this lady, and within about a month she was back, and I said, "Oh, how's your rabbits?" And she says, "They're all gone." So they came and they helped her out because, as I understand it, the district can't go onto private property with that sort of thing, but private property owners certainly can. And if they would like to know who to contact, they can contact me, and I will put them in touch with the people that this resident took care of. But I did do the best to do an informative article for the Muse, and there will be some follow-up, I'm sure, with our discussions here of other things that we can do. But it's a collective community effort. It'll have to be, because it was left for so many years untended, and it is interfering with crops and many other hazardous situations. Okay, any other discussion on the budget that was presented today? Not so great.
Yeah, on that point, I'm looking at the last year's budget planning and environmental services, and I see that this is a line item actually. So when I'm looking at these documents, I don't know if others feel the same way, but I appreciate the summation of all of the costs, but I would like to ask whether or not we couldn't see the full budget here when we look at the sheets and show this year and year to date what we've spent. That way we would know that actually rabbit control is in the budget we're just looking at today. And when we look at the increases and the numbers, we know whether or not it's being increased or not, and deal with some of those questions. That would be a big help, I think. Otherwise, we have nothing to compare to. I'm not clear what's in the budgets. I'm not saying that we need to delve into line by line. I don't like that idea, but the ability to look at it and see, so that when we see the totals, we know what we're dealing with. So my ask is it possible to see the budget as they were laid out last year, and then have us focus on the totals?
I believe what we are going to do this year is follow the same format, and then once we've done all the introductory to each department, we will have something like that. Is that correct, Mr. Creek? Like in January? Have it pulled all together so that we know where we're at?
We certainly can. I was trying to avoid having all the lines, because once it's all out there, then it is like, ooh, okay, let's pick away at this one and that one and this one and that one, and it's not per se something that council should be getting deep into the operations of things. So it's more of a set the policy for where you want staff to go, and then we'll allocate the funding to where we need it to be in order to achieve those objectives and strategic priorities that you've set. But I can certainly show it to you if you want. It's not a problem. I was just trying to avoid the, well, what about that one being $500 and what about that one being $1,000?
I understand. Marilyn?
Yeah, I like the direction that we're going, and I think that any specific questions about rabbits or any other item, the chief financial officer can answer directly. But I think avoiding getting into the actually weeds of some of this is not very productive in the long run.
Well, we were given Mr. Creek did give us a synopsis of what the budget looks like, and that was, what's the date here? September.
October 7th, I think.
Right. Yeah, so that's a place to start, and we are familiar with that. So, yeah, I like the higher end way of doing things here so far. But we certainly can bring those things up, Councillor Gray, especially that we do have the foundation that was presented to us earlier, and we can reflect back on that.
Perhaps then, well, we could just have the sheets as they are and then have a second sheet that shows that department and then with the smaller numbers. And I'm with the CFO on this, by the way. It's just that I'm thinking about the two questions which have just come up, which have been spoken to, and yet we don't have the numbers in front of us. So one's the rabbits, the other was the volunteer, or the volunteer celebration. So just to identify, well, where are they? They're in the recreation budget or in the other budget or whatever, helps do that. But I do appreciate the idea that we look at the totals.
Yep, and then actually, based on that October 7th one, so that was the third quarter. We're up to the third quarter.
Yeah.
So in January, after we've covered all 4 operating budget meetings and then the capital and special projects in December, January we'll be able to present the full year budget to actual, and you'll be able to see all those specific lines. So that's when you could be like, oh, that's where it is. This guy's going to be, we should change that. We can remove the 20,000 for rabbit removal.
Okay, but
And that kind of thing.
if that works for everybody, then maybe I can just work with the CFO myself and get the other numbers, and then no one will be worried about that. The other part.
Sorry, pardon me. I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear what you mean.
Oh, I just mean to take the sheet that we've got here
Yeah.
from the other day and just show which by department fits which sheet we're looking at by the week. And if others aren't interested to see that, that's okay by me. I just like to understand it.
Yeah.
Councillor Shukin.
I think we shouldn't be doing this on a one-on-one basis. That takes staff time, and we should be privy to all these, like the discussion all told and the numbers, so.
As a council
Yeah, so.
or a committee.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And my next comment would be the table on page 4. It's confusing to me when you combine the requisition numbers with the tax increase numbers. And if would it be possible to separate these so that the things that have to do with the tax increase, we get the totals for those, and then the ones that deal with requisitions, they're separated. We
Like
get the total for
separate
those.
boxes?
Separate boxes. It just, what's happening here is we're getting a total of 59,000, but of the 59,000, much of it doesn't relate to the district's tax. It relates to the lines. There are increases that people feel, but they're provided by other people. That would just be just to make the table in that way. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great. And then likewise the table on page 5. I think I do agree the policing being included though with our municipal tax because it's actually part of our tax increase.
Mr. Creek, so the reason we're not doing that is we're not doing the full amount, is that correct? We're not at our absolute maximum on the policing yet? Will that eventually be part of our regular tax system, or will it always be separated out like the West Shore and library? Once we meet the full contract?
No, I guess that would be up to council. If, like, once we're maxed out, you can leave it as a separate line, a police tax levy, or we can roll it into the general municipal levy. Either way you want to present it, still something we'll end up collecting at the end of the year anyway. But just how you want to present it to the residents.
Okay.
We can do either or.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion, committee?
Yeah, on page 9, I was wondering about the same issue raised by one of the residents. We got the revenue for of I think it was $174,000 or something in that range to pay for our work to do both the housing study and the changes to the OCP. And are we imagining? I'm just not sure if all that money would be spent this year or some of it will be spent next year. The $174,000.
a good chunk of it's going to be spent next year. So we have to recognize it this year
Yeah.
based on accounting and the grant standard, but it'll just be kind of moved into a reserve used next year as the expense comes up. So we don't have to increase taxes to cover that next year's.
This grant was for the extra day of the planner, is that correct? And we were going to be looking at the OCP, and that has to be done by the end of 2025 according to the province.
Correct.
Right, so it is next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Those are the questions I had, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Schiffman?
Yeah, I don't have too many questions at present. I do have some around one-time projects, likely in 2025, and again, as mentioned, there's a timely date for that, so.
There is.
Yeah. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So, if there's no more discussion warranted here, I would call for an adjournment, please.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Schiffman, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Adjourned. Thank you very much.
Can I speak, or is it too late?
Meeting is adjourned, but you're welcome to come and speak to me. Go ahead.